What's up guys, Cat, and in today's Battlecats video, I'm going to be ranking all 12 Nikolugas on a tier list based on how good or bad they are. And trust me, there's quite a bit of variety in this list, so you're not going to want to miss out. Now, getting into the first ranking, you can see I have a Papaluga tier, and none other than Papaluga will go there. And Papaluga has his own tier because he has proven time and time again how incompetent of a unit he is. He is the worst non-festival or collab Uber in the game. That's been widely known for years. And even a few years ago, he got a true form, and it did absolutely nothing for him because his biggest problem, which is multi-hit, and also his survivability, his mobility, all of these factors combine into him being unusable. I really wish he was good, but he isn't. The multi-hit robs him of 2/3 of his DPS a lot of the times, and when you have nothing to offer but Curse, which doesn't even have 100% uptime, then you're really good for nothing. I'm sorry, Papaluga, and I know he's not in his prime anymore, but I'm sure he was a beast when he was. He's just not good anymore, and I don't think he ever will be. Next, and he's going to be in the F tier, alright? Don't get me wrong. He's not as bad as Papaluga, but Nobeluga. I don't know what it is. Super old Nikolugas tend to be really bad, but he just doesn't offer a whole lot because he has no DPS really, and he doesn't really have much of a niche. He just kind of jumps on you, probably misses attacks as well, and he's just proven to be really bad long range unit as well because he has really bad mobility, just like just about every Nikuga on this list. There are very few exceptions for that rule, but yeah, I just want to get these two rankings out of the way. These two aren't very controversial. I just think they're both really bad. Both F tier, but Papaluga, oh boy. Now, breath of fresh air, I'm going to talk about a good Uber here, a Baluga. And I thought about putting him at B tier and A tier. I'm going to put him at like an A minus. I think it's pretty good that he has a ton of range. He could freeze and weaken enemies. And this just allows him to be in the back of the battlefield, and it allows him to do a lot of status effects to enemies, which keeps your front line safe, your middle line safe. And I do like the addition of his talent, which extends his weaken because the freeze does take some of that time away because he gets weakened and frozen at the same time, whoever he hits. So you do automatically lose some of that weakened time because it overlaps. But by talenting him, you get like another second back. So in that way, he's a little more worthwhile as well. But you pair him with Hacker Cat. Why do I call him Hacker Cat? You pair him with Cyberpunk, Sniper, and there's even another unit on this list that you might be able to pair him with. But all in all, I think Baluga has been kind of slept on. And honestly, he could be a B tier as well, depending on what you believe. I think he goes in A or B. But I'll put him at A tier just because when we compare him to all these other Nikolugas, he does stand out as a better unit than a lot of these cats. So I'll put him there. A minus, I'd say. B plus, put him in that range. And the meta has been friendly to him because his range and stats abilities have been pretty useful. So I'll keep him at A tier for now, just seeing how there's a severe lack of competition in this set. Next, and we're going to go all the way back down, we have Nekoluga. He's got like a D plus. I feel like he's very replaceable. I get it. He's supposed to be like Crazed Bahamut Cat, but he really isn't Crazed Bahamut Cat because, one, he doesn't really put up nearly as much damage or anything like that. And two, if he misses an attack, he's pretty much useless because he just stands there. And Crazed Bahamut Cat, not everybody really uses him because we recognize that although it's a decent option, Awakened Bahamut Cat's a lot better. But off the topic of Bahamut Cat, he just doesn't really mesh in the late game very well. I feel like there's so many better options like Euron that have roughly the same tool set, the same tools, same skill set, but more DPS and also better procs and stuff in terms of knockbacks. And also, you don't just have him sitting there idly being useless, I don't think Nikuga is the worst unit in this set, and he is the first Uber in the game, but that should also go to show that he's very outdated in terms of playstyle, and all of these new abilities that enemies have really do hinder his effectiveness. Combined with the poor survivability that you're going to notice a lot of Nikolugas have, he's just another example of a very mid unit. Next, we have Keluga. And hear me out, guys. I'm putting Keluga in A tier. I know a lot of people think it's a C or a B, but I really do like the potential it has, especially since Keluga hasn't gotten a true form yet. And when Keluga does get a true form, I feel like it's going to be very broken. But right now, Keluga has 710 range, a level 6 surge, which is guaranteed, and also 20% knockback. So, really good numbers. Also, almost 4,000 DPS from 710 standing range. That is phenomenal. And on top of that, the guaranteed level 6 surge, which means it lasts a very long time. It's a mini surge, by the way, but it's still extra DPS, and it does help alleviate the low 20% knockback chance. But I do think Keluga is going to be a very useful asset to a lot of people. And once again, this is before Keluga gets a true form. Keluga, I believe, is the second newest Nikuga, so only time will tell. But I do think Keluga has a lot of potential, so that is part of what I'm ranking it off of. I think Keluga has a bright future once it gets true forms and talents, so I'll leave it at that. But so far, showing some promise, and I really am a believer. So moving on, we have Leguga. And if the word mid can describe any unit in the game, it's probably Leguga. You know, I know a lot of people will think Leguga is one of the worst units in the game, and that's just not true. But Leguga is one of the worst legend rares in the game, if not the worst, because Leguga is basically Mecha Bun. Just rushes, deals a little bit of damage, doesn't have a lot of burst damage, which is a big problem because you just see all these little spurts of 20,000 damage, but Leguga struggles to get enemies off of its back, which means that it's going to die very quickly considering it has very short range and not a lot of health. Leguga has less health than Mecha Bun and only about the same DPS, so you can only imagine, but Leguga does have good mobility and whatnot. I just don't think Leguga is very good, but Leguga is better than a good amount of the Ubers on this list, which is pretty pathetic, but I'll keep Leguga there. Next we have, this is just depressing. I know a lot of people are putting Shisha Land in C. I'm just not ready to do it yet. I'm still going to say Shisha Land's in the B tier. No longer the A tier, because I do think late game Shisha Land is very hard to use, but early and mid game you do have to consider that as well. And I think Shisha Land is still going to help a lot of new players out due to the absolutely ballistic damage it has once it takes a measly 1% health. It has 100 knockbacks, so by far it has the best survivability on this list in terms of being able to reposition and also having a good amount of health. But it does suffer by not being immune to surge or anything like that. So it's going to be really hard to use him. Once again, it's kind of like using Craze Bahamut, but obviously Shisha Land's better. It's just unfortunate because Shisha Land a few years ago could have been regarded as the best Nikuga. I made a video a year and a half ago, and he was right there with Luffy, but I just don't see it anymore. I see him being an above average Uber in this set, but I only see him being a little above average if you compare him to all the Ubers in the game. He is above average if you compare him, but he's just not up to the level he used to be. So I'm going to put him at B tier. I'm just not ready to put him at C tier with Leguga yet. I think that's a little far-fetched, but I do think a B tier is unfortunately where he has to go. And he is one of my favorite Ubers in the game, just we don't really get to see him be as good anymore because enemies are starting to catch up to him, and nukers and specialized niches are starting to catch up to him as well. So you have Thundia getting an ultra form and stuff like that, and just a bunch of Ubers getting ultra forms that can nuke a trait. So every trait that gets power creeped is just less usage for Shisha Land. So we'll see what the future does to him, but I think it's going to be harsh. Next is Furluga. And Furluga, I'm not going to lie, used to be really bad just because it didn't have much to offer, but it's actually going to share a spot with Shisha Land, I think. Furluga is able to break barriers and shields at a guaranteed rate, which is awesome, and this is from far range, so I think that's going to be really useful, just having all that range, being able to do that, because there aren't a lot of reliable shield breakers at 100% chance of it happening, but by being far back and also being able to break barriers, that's a nice boost. But overall, it has a really solid niche that not a lot of units have, so I think it's going to help a lot of people late game, but if you're not using it to break barriers or shields, it doesn't really have good generalist stats, and I wouldn't equip it, but I do think it's a nice addition to have those two boosts from long range, so I'll put him at like a B-. Next, Yeah, Luffy is still probably the best unit in the set. I'll put him up here. He's tried and true. He has tens of thousands of DPS potentially from a year away, a light year away from whatever it's hitting. And it's just amazing, as a boss killer. And it just ages like fine wine throughout the game as well. You get into Zero Legends or end of Uncanny Legends, you go to boss stages, and it's just always reliable. It's able to deal a lot of damage from a lot of range. And the critical hit is just the icing on top. With talents, you end up with a 30% chance of one, and that critical hit deals a lot more damage. And it can even be a decent anti-metal unit. I'm not saying you should do that, but it can be. If you don't have one in your lineup and a rogue super metal hippo comes out, you can bet that it might not do too much to you, luckily. So I do think that's a nice addition. Obviously not its main selling point, but the critical hit usually is used to do even more damage to whatever it hits, whether that is a metal enemy or not. I'm going to say Luffy is an A tier, not an S tier, and I do not think that there is an S tier in this set anymore. Moving on, I'm still trying to remember all these names, Kubaluga. And Kubaluga is going to go into B tier, I think. It's a pretty solid unit. You could switch off between the forms, so I believe his evolved form is critical hits, multi-hit, 3 of them, and his true form is 3 knockbacks, which tends to be used more. I just think it's good at keeping enemies at bay, sitting in the back, kind of moving enemies away from your front lines, which is pretty valuable because there are a lot of rushers, and the fact that you can knock enemies back 2 or 3 times is pretty good. But it does normally end up interfering because of the multi-hit. So it could be a knockback in between another knockback, so you only get 1 instead of 2. But all in all, I think it's a pretty solid crowd control. An average Uber, it's like an 80 on my list here. It's a B minus, almost a C plus, but I feel like keeping him up there because he has some legitimate usage. All in all, good crowd controller, and it's able to protect your front lines pretty decently. It just kind of sits back there like Cat God in a way, but it's a little bit more mobile because it doesn't take 40 seconds in between attack, and it also can knock back 3 times and not just 2 like Cat God. So don't use him for damage, but use him for crowd control purposes. We have Aseluga next, and Aseluga is actually, he's pretty solid. I'll also put him at a B. I'll put him like here. I think he's a solid unit because you can pair him similarly with Baluga. You can pair him with Cyberpunk and Sniper, the recruit and stuff, or just the power up. But it's a pretty good backliner that can keep enemies at bay by guaranteed slow. But where it does differentiate itself from Cyberpunk is that it doesn't have a blind spot despite having over 1200 standing range. So this allows him to be virtually indestructible as long as there's no long shockwaves or anything like that are unprotected. But all in all, it's able to stand back. It's able to keep enemies away from you. And you could also talent the slow so the duritation's better. So I do think that it's a great crowd control in the fact that it can keep enemies away and have the second highest standing range in the game at 1250. These are all big boosts in terms of it being good. So I'm going to put it at the middle of B tier. I think it is one of the better units in this set now that we're starting to get to the actual usable cats, which I know there's quite a few unusable ones, but it's good that there are usable units in the set for beginners to roll on and hopefully get lucky with. And last but not least, the brand new Mamaluga. And I'm going to put Mamaluga. I don't really know how it works in terms of seeing how well it's going to do because it's brand new, but I can tell you some stuff about it. It now has the longest standing range in the game at 1400, but the problem is it has 0 movement speed, and that by default means that it's already 100 range behind the base, so it's down to 1300. Still the highest in the game, but it weakens all traits for about 7 seconds. It can't move. It has a conjure, which actually deals quite a bit of damage and stuff, which is good because in general, Mamaluga doesn't do much damage or anything like that. It's just kind of like a Baluga, in terms of staying away and doing status effects. But it's able to weaken all traits guaranteed for about 7 seconds. Has the longest range, but it doesn't move. It has really bad survivability in terms of health and only having 1 knockback. It's immune to knockbacks and boss shockwaves and all that stuff. So it's really designed to just be anchored in place and do nothing but weaken enemies. And I do think it's going to require some skill because it's a new unit, and also we don't have many cats in the game that don't move at all. I mean, it literally has 0 movement speed, so it's as fast as Cheetah Cat, ironically. But I'm going to put it as C plus because it's going to be situational, I'm sure. It's just interesting, though, because I didn't know where to put it. It's brand new, and it's one of the most interesting units in the game, I think. Definitely the most intricate unit on this list, I believe. But speaking of the list, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you can help the channel out. And once again, thank you so much for the recent channel growth. It's just been astronomical. So thank you so much, and please leave your comments down below. This is my completed list going from Luffy down to Papaluga and a bunch of units in between. So thank you for making it this far. And Sparring Cat signing off, and I'll see you in my next video. Peace.